Hello and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to look at something I think everyone cares a great deal about, which is how to improve our relationships, how to find value, how to find a way to leverage what we have in a relationship, how to stimulate conversation that is meaningful, and how to, in some ways, gear our relationships into a space that provides us value, provides us a way to feel connected. And that's the emphasis for our session today. And I always like to start off with an intention. And for today, I thought I'd love you to hold in your mind and your hearts for the session that you are dynamic. You are dynamic. And what this means is that we can learn from yesterday, but we can also grow from today onwards. We are not stuck. And this very much goes around today's session, because a sense of stuckness can often happen in relationships. And when it happens in relationships, it starts affecting us intrapsychically, in the mind, in the heart, in our emotions, in our behavior. And so if I know that I'm dynamic, I also can approach each day knowing that the past is what it is, and it is part of the library of who I am, but I can also grow into tomorrow. And I think that's a wonderful way to hold an understanding about relationships. So why do relationships feel stuck? Why does this happen? Why do I sit in a conversation with a partner, a parent, even a child, why does it feel like we're not going anywhere? Why does it feel like we're hitting our heads against the wall and both of us have a sense of displeasure when we leave the conversation? And this is the Osgood Schramm model. And it very basically, it may look quite scientific, but it very basically talks about how we encode our messages and then how the person receiving our message decodes it. Because that's what communication is. I say something, I manufacture, I create a thought, and I take that thought into language. I move that language across with airwaves, with my mouth words, sometimes with non-verbals. So I don't use words, I can use posture and behavior. And then the person on the other side decodes it. They decode the message, and then round and round we go. So surely if something's getting stuck, this is not flowing, or perhaps it's flowing all too well, but in the wrong way. And that's why it feels groundhoggy. It feels like the same thing's happening over and over. So what we need to know when we are manufacturing these ideas and these thoughts and these feelings to get across to someone else, there is a huge amount of intrapsychic in the mind work that goes on at that point. And there are several factors that impact what ends up getting said to the person. The first is, do we have a history of developmental trauma in relationships and in interacting with other people? Do we have developmental issues around how we have seen other people pattern relationships? All of that will feed into how we're going to create the sentence we're going to say. The second thing is, what skills did we learn from observational learning growing up, from our parents around us, from our friends growing up? What language did we tend to use? What kind of styles of language did we use? Are there skills that one doesn't have, and maybe are there skills that one does have? Maybe there are some so-called skills that are actually quite detrimental, that don't help this message go around in a fluid way where I can improve the value in my relationship. So we have those first two, and then of course we also have ascribed roles. Maybe I want to say something and encode a message to tell someone else, but maybe I don't think that's the kind of thing I should say to them, because maybe I need to say, hey, I need help, or I'm scared, or I'm feeling anxious, but maybe my ascribed role is to be the rock, to be the caregiver, maybe I'm always the vulnerable one, maybe I'm always the one that's always vulnerable in the ascribed role system. And then I can't put up boundaries, for example, so not put up strong ones anyway, because people are used to always leaning into me to try and help. So these ascribed roles are very important, and they go into a lot of the encoding that we do. And then the last one, I suppose, and there are many other factors, is what kind of sense of self-esteem do I have in this moment? And can I be authentic? Am I self-inhibiting? Am I withholding because I'm worried about the things that I say will make me feel even worse about who I am? Because what I fear may be the reaction from the other. So all of these ingredients, all of these filters, all of these processes are going on before we even open our mouths. All of these histories, And that's why I say we are dynamic. We can learn from history, but we can also grow. And part of the session today is to look at why we get stuck with some of these and how we can improve it, and therefore improving the quality and the nature of our relationships. So we do this, we encode all these messages, but of course there's two people in a conversation. It's called a dyadic. It goes backwards and forwards between two people. So I do all of this encoding through my history, my rich history of who I am, maybe there's traumas and developmental issues, skills, ascribed roles, and I send that message across to the receiver, and they're going to do exactly the same thing. They're going to filter it through their ascribed roles, through their histories, through their traumas, through their attachment styles. And you can see that a normal conversation is not just a normal conversation. It involves history. It involves esteem, ascribed roles, who I think I am, what I think I can and can't say. Can I be congruent with what I feel authentically as a human being in this moment? And so we should be gentle on ourselves, because there's a lot of stuff going on before we need to say something even simple to someone else. You walk into a room, think about all those things that happen before you say something, or the way that it impacts behaving. And what I want to say about this stuckness is there's an idea in psychology referred to as a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if I get bogged down by all of these, I will actually tend to start saying the things and start expressing the things and behaving in a way that gets this person here to react in a way that reinforces my perhaps faulty belief systems. You are not faulty, the belief system may be faulty. So I may actually end up encouraging a further entrenchment of these feelings, of these behaviors, of these processes, and we refer to that as a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we want to get away from that, because that is just really a cul-de-sac. So to do this, we have to understand that actually when we speak to each other, it is largely unconscious. That process in the Osgood Schramm model before is largely unconscious. You may think about some things, you may rehearse some things that you're going to say, but a lot of this is largely unconscious. So that's the first thing one needs to understand. And of course, if you've seen some of the other sessions that I've done, Jung said, until you explore the unconscious, it will control you, and you will call it fate. That's just the person I am. It's just the kind of thing I say, And so we need to know that we converse in unconscious style. So let's have a look at a conversation. This is not so much a conversation as a one-to-one dyadic. What kind of idiot can't refill a water jug? Response: you're so talented, why don't you do it? Can you hear this? There's a lot going on here, even though it's a very, very short interaction. And the reason for this is there are two styles that these two people have taken when they've started to communicate with each other. There are two styles that they've taken when they've started to communicate with each other. What has happened is the person on the left-hand side here has taken a critical parent tone. You can hear that. What kind of an idiot can't fill up a water jug? Which then is going to kind of set off the filtering in the person that is receiving that message. And they could respond in several different ways, but in this case, it is a very strong likelihood, because the person's taken this critical parent tone and language, and in some ways behavior, that the response is going to be an adapted child. So we see that this person responds, and these could be two adults, these could be two 50-year-old human beings, and I'm sure it happens often. And this person responds as the adapted child. So what we see is that stuckness comes from these styles that we employ to try and get our emotions and feelings across, but we're not doing it in a way that is expressive and meaningful. So there's the value in the relationship that we have starts dwindling, it starts diminishing. And we see this person responds, of course, as the adapted child. What kind of an idiot can't fill a water jug? You're so talented, why don't you do it? You can hear that kind of deep sarcasm and kind of a juvenile pushback. So we need to know that we absolutely have these unconscious styles. And this rather handsome gentleman behind me is Dr. Eric Byrne. And he developed transactional analysis based on our memories, thoughts, and feelings. Our memories, thoughts, and feelings and behaviors from what we observed growing up in our parents, in the way they were, either critical or nurturing. So we have critical on the one hand, punitive, judgmental, harsh. And then we have nurturing on the other hand, which is caring, sometimes over-caring. And then we have the child state, which is the memories, thoughts, and feelings we have of perhaps as a child becoming adapted or free. And by adapted, what I mean is when a child becomes compliant, quiet, withdrawn, or perhaps the other side of adaptive, which is, kind of really kind of hostile and oppositional, and quite vocal and quite, but not in a way that is the message comes across in a way that's quite defiant. And then the free child, which is a wonderful state, I suppose, is the child that can just say anything. The free child is unencumbered by self-inhibition. So we see these two parent states, critical and nurturing, and we see the child state, which is adapted, so withheld, compliant, or juvenile, which is perhaps aggressive. And then the adult state, which I have to tell you is after the age of about perhaps 20, where most of us should be having almost all of our conversations with other human beings that are adults. We should be mostly in the adult state. And if you saw from the previous example, neither of those two people were starting or engaging in the conversation in an adult state. And if we can have adult-to-adult styles in conversations, we absolutely can improve our relationships. So I wanted to show you how these two different styles can work. So on the one hand, and neither of these is right or wrong for a conversational style, by the way, but I want to show you what happens. The reason there's a groundhog effect is because often if I start, for example, in a child modality, and I followed up with a parent from the other side, we tend to go backwards and forwards in that same dynamic. In that previous example, they would stay in the kind of punitive parent and the kind of hostile child, would stay in that dynamic. The other one is crossed when I start, for example, in an adult mode, and the person responds for some reason as a child, an adapted child in that style. And this is referred to as crossed. This conversation almost ends entirely immediately, but the issue is that the complementary ones seem to continue, and that's where the stuckness comes in. The stuckness comes in when we keep on staying on the same kind of road. In this conversation, we kind of lose, kind of our will to kind of be engaged, which further diminishes our relationship. So a good example of a complementary would be the critical parent says, "You should have been home already." You can hear that is a critical parent tone. The response would be from the adapted child, because if someone starts a dyadic, if someone starts this with a critical parent tone, I'm very easily, unconsciously, remember Jung's words, you will call it fate, I very unconsciously may start to just fulfill that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. So now I act as the adapted child. Well, wow, get off my back. Like you're perfect is the response. And then the critical parent keeps going, because now we're stuck in this complementary style. At least I can manage to keep my promises. Can you hear how punitive that is? Judgmental at least. And then the adapted child just keeps going, well, at least I'm not an ass. So this is stuck, and there's no value coming from that relationship in that moment. With the cross, this is unusual and something we don't see too often in relationships, I don't think. But let's say, for example, I say to someone quite normally, how was your day? And perhaps they've had a difficult day and they're in a bad mood, whatever it might be for them. And they just come back with whatever. Now you can see this is going to end the conversation very quickly. But I also might then choose to go, well, you've come back at me with what style is this? This is adapted child, whatever. You can hear it's a juvenile kind of oppositional whatever. And so then I might unconsciously move into the critical parent. I've come as an adult. How was your day? I'm triggered by the fact that the person said to me whatever. And so then I go, okay, well, I'm going to play critical parent now. It's fine. Wow, go sulk then. So we see these two styles, the complementary and the cross, both can exist. And complementary is good because conversations continue, unless it's the wrong kind of conversation that's not giving us value in our relationships. What I need to say, most importantly, is that the style that we are using in conversations needs to be appropriate. It needs to be appropriate. If I'm an adult and talking to an adult, we should be sitting in adult-adult dyadics. If I have a toddler, a 2-year-old, and I'm a parent, it should be parent-child. If a toddler bumps their toe, there's no point in saying to them, well, no worry, that'll sort itself out in a week and a half. We'll apply some antibacterial and you'll be good to go. There's no point in doing that, really. I mean, what they need there is a nurturing parent. That's why these styles exist. Oh, you knocked your toe. You got a boom. Let's have a look at that. Sorry, my darling. So what we need to know is if we don't use an age and appropriate style, there is a lot of radiation. There's a lot of radiation, both in held feelings and in distance, a lack of safety. The conversations feel less and less and less safe. And this is implicated in addiction, for example, because if the conversations feel less and less and less safe, I might start, throwing the switch and finding other reliable targets for conversation, I suppose. So let's have a look at this. We're going to look at this previous example where the critical parent adaptive child complementary style was entrenched. You should have been home already. Wow, get off my back like you're perfect, says that style of the child. At least I managed to keep my promises, more punitive judgment. At least I'm not an ass, more opposition, more defiance. And what we see is the net effect here is it feels less safe, less connected, less vulnerability. I'm not going to share anything with you because you keep on biting my head off. Less intimacy, so we're not sure as hell if we're a romantic couple, we're not going to be intimate. And there's no intimacy in terms of connection. And then more held anger. Both of these individuals walk away from that conversation with stored anger, which can eventually become resentment. So what would an adult-to-adult version of this look like? Let's have a look. So an adult-to-adult version would be using the full gamut, the full experience, the full amount of communication you can give to another human being, which is emotions, thoughts, and behavior which are congruent, which are the same. I am nervous to say this, but I was worried when you were not home on time, everything okay? Now, this other person in this conversation is not on the back foot. Yes, they might be slightly alarmed, but only because they can hear the care or the worry coming from the other person. They're not being judged. There's no judgment here. And the person's saying, listen, I'm nervous to say this. They're being vulnerable. They're being congruent because they are nervous. That's what actually made this person use that language to begin with. Remember, we use these styles because we think it's going to suit us best, but actually it ends up just creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. So they start off by saying, wow, I'm nervous to say this, but I was worried that when you were not home on time, everything okay? And then I don't have to go into an adapted child response. I can stay in adult. Yeah, sorry for making you anxious because I'm reflecting that I can hear you anxious. I got delayed in a meeting. And that, of course, de-escalates the person who asked the question's emotion. And it's okay, glad to have you home. What we see here is this increases vulnerability, increases intimacy. There are no held emotions. Both of these people get to diffuse their emotions away, which is excellent because we want that emotional content gone. It served its purpose and now it's gone. And this conversation promotes safety and reliability. I know I can go to this person to talk about stuff that is important for me. This person, this relationship, I don't feel safe in. And that's important to hold. So I want to offer you to look at the relationships that you have and make a list. What styles do you use with different people most often? And you will find the ones that you use most often. And when we're under stress and under pressure and our intrapsychic energy for the day is low, so we've had a long day, we tend to fall into these reactionary styles more easily. In the beginning of the day, one tends to be able to keep it quite adult. And then, as the day goes on and we lose our ability to use our ego or our prefrontal cortex and we kind of diminishing returns, we tend to kind of react into these other kind of, getting home from work. You're at the end of a long day. You've used up all your energy. We tend to rely on these reactionary styles in those moments. So, what kind of styles do you have with different people? Am I using the adult position in most of my adult relationships? Yes or no? I mean, ask the question so we can do a forensic. Psychology is a lot about asking important questions so you have data, so you have information, so you can make choices. Remember, from You Are Dynamic is that I have a history, but I also can grow tomorrow. And that requires to see the landscape for what it is. Or perhaps am I reacting as a free child? I just do whatever I want and I'm okay and I'm cool. Or maybe as an adapted one in relationships. Maybe I keep on being quite, reactive and juvenile with my partner. Do I take a critical view of my partner and maybe I'm very critical of them and I'm using this critical parenting style the whole time and use this critical parenting language? Or maybe am I still compliant or rebellious as an adult with my parents? Now I could be a 40-year-old adult with 80-year-old parents and I'm still acting like a 14-year-old that refuses to do their homework. Is this the style I'm stuck in? So we ask these questions and then look at all of this list of people and maybe write it down, pause the video, write it down and then try and write down next to what is the style that you find mostly happens between the two of you. And there's no judgment here. It's not like they're always critical parent and I'm always the adapted child. It's important to know that sometimes we create the self-fulfilling prophecy, so I walk in already feeling like an adapted child, and I might filter the message they say and then come back as an adapted child. So just be gentle with yourself and others while you do this, and just write down the styles that you think that you employ generally in the relationships that you have with these people. It is a wonderful, beautiful exercise, and then it allows you to go, okay, So maybe with my siblings, I'm always adapted child. Maybe I'm always going into this adapted child. But I mean, we're both adults, so what can I do to improve that? You know, with my children, maybe I'm speaking to them too much like adults. Maybe I'm treating them like adults when actually they require some nurturing and some care. With my partner, maybe I always feel I'm always being super critical. So maybe what can I do about that? Can I say to them, hey, I wonder if the conversations we have, you know, now I'm speaking really adult, I wonder if the conversations we have are really difficult for us because I'm sometimes going to a critical parent. Can you tell me about that? Is that possible? Do I do that? This can be a very, very healthy exercise. A very healthy exercise. And how do we improve these styles? There are other videos on communication coming, and certainly in the past, but the one thing to know is that the first thing you'll know is, do I feel stuck? And if you do feel stuck, then you'll know in that relationship, in that dialogue, in that conversation, that the value is diminishing and that you are not getting what you need from the conversations. So you will start feeling very groundhog, very stuck in those conversations. So if you know that, then you know there's an inappropriate style. Remember I said the styles have to be appropriate and age-related. And then you have to think about what's not being said. And I'm going to get to this example in the end to show you what I mean. But there's something that we're not saying. In the example of the person saying, what kind of time is this to come home? What is not being said is, I'm scared, I'm afraid. That's what they didn't say. They said it in a judgment instead because they chose critical parent. So think about what's not being said. And then use a new way to express what is not being said. Use a new way. And I'm going to give you a quick tip here. The language looks like this. I'm feeling whatever emotion. I need to let you know what the actual content is. And then perhaps a boundary or an invitation to continue. So find a new way to express it, because clearly what is being said in the style of one of those transactional modes. So let's revisit this to kind of wrap up. What kind of an idiot can't you fill a water jug? You're so talented, why don't you do it? Critical parent, adapted child. What do we really need to do in this conversation? So the first thing is it's stuck, for sure. The second thing is, what is not being said? What is this person, this partner of mine, for example, what are they not saying? There's something they're not saying, because all that's coming is a judgment. That doesn't help. And so let's have a look at how we could redo this. So if I stay in the adult, if I stay in the now, and I'm not bogged down by all those filters, I can just get to say, I'm feeling, I need, and then a boundary. So instead, I'm feeling anxious to say this because it is a difficult thing to say, but I need to let you know I need help refilling the jug. What do you think about that? Can you hear how different that is? What kind of idiot can't refill a jug versus, I'm feeling anxious to say this. And maybe angry. You could add angry. I'm feeling angry. I need to let you know I need help refilling the jug. What do you think about that? And this is important because then the person on the other side doesn't have to do anything spectacular. All they have to do is listen to the very clear communication they've gotten. And then I can respond as an adult and say, okay, sure, I didn't realize it was upsetting you. I forget often, so I need you to help remind me gently, please. Very different to, what kind of an idiot can't fill a jug? You're a magician, you do it. Very, very, very different. I hope this has been meaningful. Look at your relationships. Be gentle with yourself when you do it. I want to wish you all a wonderful few days, and I hope that understanding transactional styles isn't about getting bogged down. It's about being dynamic. It's about looking at new data, looking at new ways that we've employed, and going, is this working for me? Do I feel stuck? Can I move on? Can I grow tomorrow? You are all beautiful, spectacular human beings. Please be gentle with yourselves and others, and I will see you all in the next